All right, we're back. Now we're going to talk about podcast art. And in this module, I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to have compelling podcast art. And I'm also going to show you how you can make it yourself for free without hiring a graphic designer, with no graphic designing experience needed. So let's go ahead and dive in. Our podcast art needs to be a few things. First of all, it needs to be a specific size. iTunes will not approve your podcast if you have the wrong size of podcast art. So this is very important. We need a 1400 by 1400 pixel graphic. And I just highly recommend just stick with 1400 by 1400. It's easy. It's high res enough to be clearly viewed on mobile. And that's the file size we're going to create today. Now, we want to think about something. We want to make sure that our art is big, bold, and beautiful. I want you to think about the 3 Bs while you're creating your art. There's a couple reasons why, but a lot of times people are scanning the podcast charts or looking at new podcasts, and if your art is very compelling and beautiful, they're more likely to click on that and be interested in learning more about you. Now, we also are going to scale test our art. It's very important because the art file is actually going to show up very small on mobile, which is where most people are listening to podcasts. So we want to be very sure that somebody can see our art the right way on a phone. I want you to match your business branding. So if you've got a blue and black website, I don't want you to create art that is pink and purple. We want to stick with our business branding. Faces tend to be more engaging. So this is just kind of a human trait. We look for faces and things. Sometimes you'll look at a wall and you'll see a stain and you see a face. That's because our brain is wired to see faces. When you're born, you start to look for your mother's face. So if you have any type of compelling photography of yourself, I highly recommend considering incorporating that into your podcast art. We do not want to use small text. And again, that goes back to scale testing our art. When it's very small, if you've got a bunch of small text, no one's ever going to be able to read it. And we're gonna make our art in a JPEG format. So we're going to do 1400 pixels by 1400 pixels in a JPEG format. So let's dive in. Let's take a look at good art versus bad art. So on the left, we've got the Podcast Buddy podcast. This is just an example. We've got a very nice picture of a gentleman. This is not me. I am not good looking enough to put my face on podcast art, but this guy is pretty handsome. He's smiling. He looks excited. It makes me think that this guy's going to have a really engaging, fun podcast. And we've got some giant text that says the Podcast Buddy podcast. Very simple. It's a very minimalist approach to this, and that's what I want you to think about when you're creating your podcast art. Now, to the right, we've got the Road to Freedom podcast. This image, I'm not sure what we're looking at. It's a train car maybe, and it's snowing, and there's a bunch of very small text. So even at this size, which is very large, I'm having trouble reading all the text on the podcast art. So here's a look at what podcast art ends up looking like on a phone. We're just looking at the top charts section, but you can see all the tiles are very, very small. So if we just go run down to like number 4, Pod Save America, we can clearly read that. I can see that there's a picture of George Washington listening to earbuds. It's big, it's bold, it's beautiful, and you can see that all the top podcasts have that same running theme. Very minimalist, a large image, and very large, bold text. So I just wanted to remind you that we can get carried away by putting too much information on our podcast art, and by just sticking to that big, bold, and beautiful, we can make sure that we create engaging art that people may want to click on. Okay, so now I want to show you how you can make your own podcast art completely free without any type of graphic design background. We're on canva.com. This is a free website where you just create an account and you have access to create a multitude of different designs. So not only can we create our podcast art, but we can make things like PowerPoint presentations and posters and Facebook posts. So I highly recommend this as a tool for your business overall. What we're here to do today, of course, is create some podcast art, and I'm going to walk you through how to do that. But just landing on the homepage, you can see they've got all kinds of different designs available to us that we can make, and we're going to go ahead and start by clicking Create a Design. Now they've got, like I said, social media templates, documents, birthday cards, things like that. We're going to go into the personal section and click this little arrow over here, and we're going to go to CD cover. Now, you can see the CD cover template is 1400 pixels by 1400 pixels. Now, when I click on that, it's going to show me all kinds of free templates. So you can literally just click on one, it's going to populate it, and you could start to change the text. My podcast, and augment these existing designs to fit what you want them to be. So I highly recommend looking through these. You can search by theme. They're mostly free. Some of them have an image that you need to purchase, typically for about $1. So if you've got a couple bucks, or if you want to skip your Starbucks this week, you can easily purchase one of these pre-made templates, and they might already match your branding, which is super cool. I'm going to actually show you how to create something from scratch. So let's go home, and we're going to click Create a Design. And I'm going to go over here to Custom Dimensions. Now, if you remember, we're doing 1400 by 1400, and I'm going to click Create a Design. So this gives me a blank canvas that I can do whatever I want with it. They've also given me some cool templates already, just in case I'm not feeling adventurous, but I have an idea of what I want to do. So you can purchase images through Canva. I use something called depositphotos.com. I have an account. I bought a package that I've got a bunch of images to download. And I know I want to use something that has to do with a rocket. So I just searched rocket, and they show me all these different images. They're all high-res files available to download for typically under $5. And the one that I selected was this blank rocket and cloud icon. So I downloaded the 2000 by 2000 pixel JPEG because I'm using 1400 by 1400. I want something that's a little bit bigger than the actual pixel size that I'm using, because I'm going to get rid of this launching ideas portion. But I already downloaded it, and I just simply dragged it into my uploads. So you just download it, and you could drag it in here, and then it's going to populate into your uploads. You can see I've got some pictures and some other things that I've been working on, but we're going to use this one. So I'm just going to click on it, and it's going to automatically place it into my design. Now, by clicking on this little circle here, I can make it larger, and I'm just going to go ahead and make it as large as I can to get rid of this text that we have here. And I want the rocket to be coming from the bottom, because we're want to make sure we're launching the right way. Now, you can see that little pink line that appears. That's showing me that I am perfectly in the middle of this design, which is very helpful. Now, let's go ahead and just make this a little bigger so we can cover the entire canvas. There we go. Okay, and I've snapped to the middle. So now I have my background. It's bright, so it's big, bold, and beautiful. And now I want to add some text. So I'm just going to go over here to the sidebar to text. And they even have templates for text. So if I like this particular text, I could just, click in here and change it to whatever I want. My podcast. And so it's pretty cool as far as graphic design goes without having to be a graphic design genius. I'm going to get rid of this entire thing by just clicking on it and pressing delete. And what I want to do is I want to add a heading. So I'm going to add a heading. And if you just click on the item, you can drag it around and move it. And I am going to go ahead and just type shortcut, because that's the first word. And I want to keep all my text separate, because I'm going to be moving them around and resizing them. And you can actually just drag this little circle and make it as big as you want, or you could click in the size and pick a different size from there. If you need to make it bigger, you just click these little sidebars. Really simple and easy to use. Okay, so I've got my shortcut. I'm going to create another, and I really like this railway heavy. If you want a different text, they've got all kinds of cool different text for free, or fonts rather. But I like this one because it's big and bold. So I'm going to go and click heading again and drag this up a little bit. And I'm just going to type podcasting, because that's the last word. And let's make this really big. That's too big. I want it to fit perfect. Okay, so you can see I've got that pink line, which is awesome, which means I am completely centered. And I am actually going to move it up a little bit. Okay, so we've got shortcut, and we need the word to. I'm actually going to make this a little bigger. I want to maximize the space that I have. Might be a little too big. There we go. Okay, great. Now I need more text, so I'm going to go ahead and make another text box and type to. We're going to go ahead and move this up and make it bigger. There we go. And I'm going to make this text white. So if I select it and click the text color box, I can either pick a color from the palette here, or I'm just going to go with white because that's what I want. It's already up there. Black and white is up there. So there we go. And if you see this, it's snapping into completely center with the other text. Now, this isn't going to pop very well off the background, so I'm going to put a little box behind it. So I'm going to go to Elements, and they've got all these really cool elements that you can use in your presentations or your podcast art or whatever you're doing that are typically mostly free, which is awesome. And I'm going to go under Shapes and click this box right here. So it gives me a big box, and I can change the color of the box by clicking the color palette here. And I'm just going to go with black. So I'm going to shrink this down by dragging. I'm going to put it over here. I'm going to get it to the size that I'm looking for. And now it's covering up my text. So what do? We can click on that and go to Position and press backward. What that does is it puts it behind the layer in front of it. Now I'm going to actually move this over for a second to resize this because it gets tricky when you've got two things on one another that are similarly sized. And I'm just going to go ahead and pull this in. And I've got the grid there that shows me I'm directly in the center and lined up with that. So I'm really into this. Shortcut to podcasting. I like this. This is big, bold, and beautiful, but it's very big on my screen. So let's go ahead and scale test this. So we're going to go ahead and go down to this little percentage here, and I'm going to click 10%. Now that's a more ideal look that people are going to see on a phone, and I can still clearly see it's a rocket. I can see shortcut to podcasting. So I'm feeling confident that somebody on a phone is going to be able to make out what this is. And I'm just going to go back to 50%, and everything looks really good. So this is what I'm going to use for my podcast art. I'm going to go ahead and name it by just clicking in here. And let's just go shortcut to podcasting. And I've named my file, which is always important in anything that you're creating. And if I click publish, I have the option to do a couple different things, but I'm just going to go ahead and download it. Now it's going to suggest PNG file. I want a JPEG. And I just select that, press download. It's going to prepare my design, give me a memorable quote, and download directly to my computer. So Canva is an amazing tool for your business, and that is how you create podcast art completely free. Let's move on to the potential that you're not feeling adventurous and you don't want to create your podcast art. You want to hire somebody. Let's look at some options for that. So one of the options you can take is called Fiverr.com, Fiverr.com. This is a site where there's all kinds of freelancers creating things for your business. You could get music here for your podcast, your podcast intro music. But what we can do here is just go to podcast art, and all these different designers come up, and we can get podcast art for as little as $5. So let's click on this, guys. And for $5, we can get, this is wrong, but we can get a 1400 by 1400 pixel JPEG with unlimited revisions in one day. And you can really see what the designer's up to. Like, I really like this piece of art. That's really cool. And you can just pick a different designer. There's different levels, so people are going to start at a specific price. And then if you want something else, as far as a bigger size or more revisions, things like that. But there's a lot of talented designers on here that can do something for you really quickly. And you don't have to have the stress of potentially making it yourself or feeling like it's not meeting your standards. And you can give one of these designers your all all your assets, and they will create something that looks awesome. So if you're going to look for hiring a designer for your art, there's also another option called 99 Designs. This is a more premium service where you actually submit and people will bid on your project. Typically, it's a little more expensive than Fiverr.com, but I just wanted to give you another option. So that's podcast art. I can't wait to see what you come up with, and I will see you in the next module.